Harness the outrage. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. Welcome, everybody, to Lights On. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe where you're watching right here on the Jessica Denson YouTube channel. My God, what a week. What an incredible turn of events we experienced last Saturday. I will tell you, I was at the No Kings protest in Los Angeles, where over 200,000 people peacefully protested in the streets of LA, which has been absolutely ground zero for Donald Trump's ICE terror raids, his attempted militarization of the streets of this country. And it felt to me like an incredible inflection point, an inflection point that we absolutely must take advantage of. That clip I just had up for a second, which I'm going to play again for you in a minute, showed the crowd's reaction when I asked them a critical question about whether or not they wanted this illegal administration to remain in power. This week, after that massive showing of support, over 5 million people in the streets in over 1,200 cities across this country, while Donald Trump couldn't even fill the bleachers at a military parade. He is bringing us literally to the brink of war, an illegal war, a war that it would be in violation of international law, very much messaging that he sides with Israel in their provocation of Iran, and possibly bringing the United States into another massive conflict that does not have the authorization of Congress or the desire or backing of the American people. And just to show more of how much opposition currently exists to Donald Trump's attempted executive overreach, members of his own party, including Thomas Massie, the Republican representative from Kentucky, is now aligned with people like Ro Khanna and AOC in raising a War Powers Resolution Act that would be the only legal way as far as domestic law, let's not even touching on international law, but the only legal way that Donald Trump could proceed with U.S. military involvement in Iran. So there are so many cracks on top of the fact that this man is vastly, vastly unpopular. We had a show just this week where I underscored the very likely possibility that Donald Trump did not actually win this election that is backed by all of the support that we see in the streets in opposition to him. And that's reflected in the polls that are coming out that show just how unpopular he is. He's lashing out this week at Fox News because they have the audacity to put out a poll that shows just how unpopular he is in this poll. It released by Fox News on Wednesday. It shows that a majority of voters disapprove of his job performance by an 8-point margin. And this is actually regarded as one of the best polls in the industry. And it finds that a majority of voters are still feeling pessimistic about the state of the economy. Of course, the economy that he was supposed to fix and make so great, not to mention all of the economic gains that did occur under the Biden administration after a global pandemic. But and specifically on the issue of the economy and inflation, his job approval is underwater by 30 points, with just 34% of voters approving of his performance on the price level. So this is one of so many points where the American people are against this administration, not to mention the blatant, naked, authoritarian power grabs that I'm going to outline for you in a minute from an excellent article in The Guardian. If you don't understand what kind of crisis we're facing, hopefully this will crystallize it and condense it for you. And I just can't imagine, with all of these inflection points of the power of the people and the outrage to what is going on, and the cracks in his own base and party over his attempted actions in Iran and really on so many issues, why Democratic lawmakers would not take this as the golden opportunity to back impeachment and removal of this illegal administration. If not now, when? How many of our rights, how many of our neighbors are you going to let be kidnapped off the streets of this country, sent to detention centers where they're sleeping on floors in crowded rooms with no medical care and non-working bathrooms, How many people are you going to let be terrorized? How many people are you going to let be afraid to go to work or send their children to school? How much of the US economy are you going to let collapse? How much of a global conflict with literally nuclear implications are you going to let this man enter us into without even being a legal president? He is an insurrectionist president who doesn't even have the legal authority to be there. If you are not starting impeachment proceedings and backing them now, what the hell are you waiting for? I'm going to read, like I said, in just a minute from that Guardian piece, but let me go ahead and play this clip for you from Saturday. This has been a pet peeve of mine. I kind of repeat it on the show. I say, there's not a time when I go to a protest and I say, we want Trump removed from office and he should be removed from office, that I hear a single person in the crowd saying, oh no, that's not what we want. Let's just wait until the more opportune time. So this Saturday in LA, after I gave my speech, we traveled and marched from City Hall to Pershing Square, traversing streets and streets of LA without a single, I got to tell you, I didn't see a single Los Angeles police presence on that march. They entered much later when I think they were really provoking and trying to clear out the protesters using the tear gas and means that I don't think were appropriate at all. But for the time that we were there in the morning, when the march was scheduled, it was 100% peaceful. The presence of the people was, I literally, I just don't have words. But so I decided this time to get back on that truck at the end of the march and ask this explicit question, just in case there's any doubt out there as to the sentiment of the American people and the resistance and the people flooding the streets as to what should be done with this illegal administration. Listen to their reaction. And by the way, don't mind the swaying back and forth. I was just trying to catch the reaction of the whole crowd.
Is not in favor of removing Donald Trump for this crowd. Is there anybody who is not in favor of removing Donald Trump? Is everybody here in favor of removing Donald Trump? You need to take that energy. You need to take that demand directly to your representatives in Congress. You need to ask them if they are not backing impeachment and removal now. What the hell are they waiting for? That is what this movement represents. We're not just going to mitigate the sabotage of democracy. We are here to end it. God bless you. God bless Los Angeles. Stay in your power.
All right. So I hope you had the opportunity to be in one of those incredible, incredible crowds. Actually, right before I started recording that clip, I announced the Removal Coalition, which I announced to you last week on this show. It's at removalcoalition.org. It is not an independent entity doing anything on our own other than we are trying to amplify other organizations, grassroots organizations that are explicitly demanding immediate, peaceful, constitutional removal of this presidency and amplify that. Underscore that as the demand, as you can see, is truly the demand of the protests and direct action space. So if you haven't visited already, please go to removalcoalition.org. You're going to see close to 10 organizations that have joined us already. That list is growing. It's also, in my private conversations, really encouraging some organizations to focus in more on that direct activism, that direct lobbying for impeachment, that direct ask in their protests and in their activism for removal. Why? Why do we need to act swiftly? Why can't we just mitigate the problem that we're facing, this disgusting daily assault on our democracy and our progress towards being a free people and a just society and being that city shining on a hill? Why can't we just mitigate it issue by issue? Let me give you a list of reasons why. This is from a Guardian piece written by Robert Tate out of Washington. It's called "He's Moving at a Truly Alarming Speed. Trump Propels the U.S. into Authoritarianism." Let me just read you the beginning of this article. A senator handcuffed, people snatched in public, military deployed. Trump's slide towards autocracy has come quicker than critics feared. And it reads like a checklist of milestones on the road to autocracy. A succession of opposition politicians, including Alex Padilla, a U.S. senator, are handcuffed and arrested by heavy-handed law enforcement for little more than questioning authority or voicing dissent. A judge is arrested in her own courthouse and charged with helping a defendant evade arrest. Masked snatch squads arrest and spirit people away in public in what seem to be consciously intimidating scenes. The president deploys the military on a dubious legal premise to confront protesters contesting his mass roundups of undocumented migrants. A senior presidential aide announces that habeas corpus, a vital legal defense for detainees, could be suspended. The sobering catalog reflects the actions not of an entrenched dictatorship, but of Donald Trump's administration. As the president, I will add illegal president's sternest critics struggle to process what they say has been a much swifter descent into authoritarianism that they imagined even a few weeks ago. And then the article goes on to talk about how Trump is moving much faster than other authoritarians. Stephen Levitsky of Harvard, political scientist, says he's throwing authoritarian punches at a much greater rate than any of these other cases in their first year in power, including, I think he cites Orban in Hungary, Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, Erdogan in Turkey. He is moving much, much faster than these people did. Someone says, Eric Rubin, a former ambassador to Bulgaria, this is going faster than Putin even came close to going in terms of gradually eliminating democratic institutions and democratic freedoms. It took him years. We're not even looking at 6 months here. That's why I've been so explicit on this show and made this show Lights On a movement and committed myself to activism in this time when there are many other things, as I often tell you, that I would like to be doing, because I know that there is no time to waste. We can't afford to be strategizing our way out of this. We have to be aggressive. As I quoted to you last week, we have to have a blitzkrieg of legal resistance. A blitzkrieg, like he is trying to create chaos on a daily basis. We have to be creating chaos for him on the legal constitutional front. What could that be? That could be forcing an impeachment vote every day of the week. It could be objecting to unanimous consent in the Senate. There's so many things our lawmakers could be doing. You know, we've had Representative Al Green on the show. He promised us that he will force an impeachment vote before the end of this month. So I'm very much looking forward to following up with Representative Al Green and seeing him force that vote next week. I'm sure he will talk to us again here on Lights On. We have to be as relentless in our protection and defense of democracy, in honor of all of those who have sacrificed for it, as they are in their attempted sabotage and destruction of it. And speaking of honoring those who have defended our democracy, there's nobody that we owe it to more than our veterans who have actually put their lives on the line for this country. You know, I've been so involved in bringing veterans and amplifying the involvement of veterans who are so opposed to this administration and upholding their oaths through our march in Washington and the events that I've continued to be a part of. And my guest today is a veteran himself. He's a Navy veteran, former Republican, someone who I have had the pleasure of being on his show several times. And he has been such an incredible ally in amplifying my activism and trying to get people to the streets to demonstrate what we need to do right now and harness and take back our power. He has such inspirational messages, I will say, in spite of the dire circumstances that we're facing, and we need to hear them. And we're actually right on. I was right in line with something he posted this week on his Substack. His name is Jack Hopkins. You've probably heard of him. Very powerful voice out there, hosts the Jack Hopkins podcast and writes very often on Substack. So we're going to bring Jack in just a minute. I just want to take a moment. I don't do this often enough because you guys know I'm not a professional YouTuber. I'm a one-woman operation over here, but I want to thank all of the members here on Lights On, all of you who have signed up for membership, all of you who give in the live chat, the super chat, I think it's called, or stickers. I don't even know the technical names, but I just want to thank you all so much for that support. Thank you for the support that you have given to this show, Lights On, to this movement. You are truly, truly part of something incredible, and I'm really honored to be in this fight with you. So I just want to thank you for that before we move forward today. And please join me in welcoming my friend, Jack Hopkins, to the show. Jack, welcome to Lights On.
Thank you so much. Hey, I can't tell you how excited I was to get your email about this, because I love interacting with you. There's something always good that comes out of it. And so it's a pleasure to be on your show.
Oh, thanks so much, Jack. Thanks so much. If you have not watched the Jack Hopkins show yet, you have to do it. Is it jackhopkinsshow.com?
Yes, it is actually. Yes.
Okay. Go to jackhopkinsshow.com and jackhopkinsnow.com is your Substack, right?
It is. Thank you.
Okay. Go to those two, because Jack, first of all, when you're a guest on his show, he makes you feel like a diamond. He is just such an endearing host. He really has such thoughtfulness about him, really deep thoughtfulness that is so needed for this moment. And he does, I've watched your interviews with other people too. There's an element, kind of like a spiritual element to your conversations, Jack, that I so appreciate. And so I hope that, I'm sure a lot of people on this live right now and watching are already familiar with you. But if you're not already, you definitely have to check out Jack, because he has a very special voice that's needed right now.
I appreciate the kind words.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, gosh, Jack, I don't even know where to start. I wanted to, maybe we can start with the ICE raids, because this is like terrorism for communities in this country. We have an immigration crisis that is really a humanitarian crisis, that is a complex issue that has needed to be solved with good faith actors for decades. But those good faith attempts have never gotten anywhere, because political opportunists and terrorists like Trump and his cabal have only wanted to use this as a political wedge issue.
Sure.
And now that they are in power, they are genuinely terrorizing communities. You have ICE agents going into communities masked in plain clothes, not identifying themselves, sweeping people off the streets of this country, including in many more and more documented cases every day, even American citizens. Being an American citizen does not isolate you from these attacks. We remember a few weeks ago when they swept up, or not a few months ago at this point, Rumeysa Öztürk, the Turks university student who committed the crime of exercising free speech against genocide in Israel, and they swept her off the streets. This is going on a daily basis. It's going on in cities all across this country. I want to talk really specifically a little bit about the legal implications of all of this, but just what are your thoughts when you see this going on right now?
I just made a post, I think last night, about masked men, in many cases without any kind of identifying information, and refusing to give any identifying information when requested. I can tell you this right now: you can go on the internet and find any number of websites run by Republican gun owners, many of them veterans with combat experience, who run seminars on personal safety, who in their seminars would identify the types of people we are seeing show up in some instances as someone you could legally use lethal force to defend yourself against. I say again, these are Republicans who support Donald Trump, who teach their seminar members how to identify. Look, I ask anybody listening right now, if you were out shopping, if you were just getting out of your car and three or four masked men without badges, without any kind of warrant, without somebody saying, look, we are with ICE or we are with, would you fear for your life? And the answer is absolutely you
Of
would.
course. It's
Now,
a
if you,
very dangerous situation they're setting up.
it's nuts. And I think that the fact that that element exists is only for one reason, and that is to establish that fear factor. And we know psychologically that when people are fearful, they are quick to take a submissive posture in many cases and conform. And that's what they were looking for, is conformity and passivity, the very thing that we cannot allow as a collective mindset, mood, emotion. We can't allow that to settle in, because historically we know what happens when it does. It spells the end.
Yeah.
So, that's what I think about. You asked me that question, what are my thoughts on that? And when I see those images of a mother holding a child, you know, uh, it's a dualistic thing. I was a single father for about 10 years. I, I had her when she was an infant by myself. And look, I know that dualistic kind of back and forth thing that your brain does. You are in a situation where you are terrified, but you're simultaneously realizing that your child is terrified, and you're trying to. It's like you're living two separate lives at once. And for mothers particularly, I don't know, I'm sure I didn't experience something quite on the level that a mother who carried the child in the womb experiences. But what I experienced was so powerful that when I place myself in the situation of these people that we are seeing on television, on the nightly news, or on the internet,
Yeah.
and I think, look, if you can't identify that legitimately as terrorism, then I don't know what counts. Uh, you know, and to think that you are in the clear, you know that in your mind you haven't done anything wrong. When we see U.S. citizens, people who are here legally, they're not even walking out of the house, although now some of them are, but they weren't walking out of the house thinking, I need to be worried about getting whisked off and sent to God knows where, right? South America and some
Yeah.
remote place. That wasn't
Sudan. They're literally sending people to Sudan, Jack. I mean, it's out of control.
right. And
Yeah.
look, we know, going back to you know, Middle East with the black sites, the CIA black sites, right? I've read some articles that kind of compare the places where they're being sent, like you said, in Sudan, to black sites, in the sense that once they are there, we really don't know what the hell's going on in those
Yep.
places.
Yep.
Look, when our sitting congressman can't show up and get a tour, not only can they not show up and get a tour or get inside, look around, or talk to uh, one of the people being held there, but they themselves get assaulted and or arrested. We're not living in the same world we were prior to Donald Trump. It is not the same world. It has changed forever.
Yeah.
And we are in the process now, I believe, where this ongoing change is happening. And at this point, it's a question of where do we want this change to terminate? Where do we want it to stop? What don't we want it to get to? And what are we willing to do to make that happen? I see a lot of times people will post a comment on a post that I've made or something, and it's pretty common to see a comment of what are we, the average citizen, what is it we're supposed to do? And I've got to tell you, inside my mind, the immediate answer is I think you already know. You're just not comfortable with it. Because not to say that there's like one answer and you can give this one answer and that's the catch-all for everything. But what I mean by that is more times than not, when somebody's asking that question, they're wanting to hear something that's more comforting than the one they've got inside their head that they're trying like hell to push away from and escape from, right? Because that one's resonating as this is probably the answer. I mean, it's undeniable because it just keeps showing up. It's always there. And so they ask, hoping somebody will provide something so compelling that they can go, oh, thank God. That's the answer. And it's so much better than the one that's been dogging me. The answer most people have in their head and heart at this point is probably the one that's the closest to the truth because it sits right next to that thing called things we don't want to have to confront. But yet, that's where the answers are.
And what is that answer, Jack?
The answer, I guess, I think there are many, but if I were to boil that down into one, I think it is, look, we have to resist on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
Because frankly, I've got to tell you, and when I say this, I'm speaking about our leadership right now, right? I'm not necessarily, although I'm not excluding, I'm not necessarily talking about voters at this particular time. I'm talking about our leadership.
Yeah.
But when I think about what's happening on the leadership level right now, it does not remotely resemble what this moment calls for.
It's abysmal. It's abysmal, Jack. It's abysmal. And so I'm gonna take a leap here and guess that you're on board with me when I think that Democrats who are just posturing for the midterms and not making a full-fledged daily narrative hijacking about Donald Trump's crimes and why he needs to be removed from office aren't doing enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I don't mean to compare these two careers, if you will, as a one-for-one match. I understand that they are not, but there are some similarities between the military and being an elected leader. You take an oath when you enlist. You take an oath when you become you even on a local level, right? There's some type of oath involved, and I think most people prior to Donald Trump, when they would take those oaths, they knew what the words were. They've either read them prior to holding up their hand and taking that oath, or as they are taking the oath, they're aware of the words as they say them. But I think there was a nature of people to take that oath, oftentimes not believing they would ever actually have to go to that extreme.
Have to act on it.
Have to act on it.
Yeah.
And now that we're at the stage now where the only thing that counts is action. right? Which is, back to your point, is why it's troubling when you speak about the people posturing for the election, right? Don't tell me what you're going to do once you are
Yeah,
reelected or once you get in office. I don't care. What the hell are you doing right now?
exactly.
And you don't need to be telling me about that. You need to be doing it.
Exactly.
And that's not something that I'm seeing happen. Now, anytime I've made a comment like that online or on social media, of course, as would be expected, I get some pushback from people who defending a particular politician and saying, "What more do you want them to do?"
So much more.
Look, I will come back, and I heard you mention him on your intro, Al
Yeah.
Green, right?
Yeah.
Al Green. I was appalled. I was angry. I was disappointed the night Al Green was escorted out, and I watched everyone else stand there and watch and do nothing.
Yeah.
That was a moment that concerns me deeply. That was a moment that told me they still think it's business as usual, and that Al Green was a radical, or that Al Green had temporarily lost his mind. No, Al Green was somebody that understood the reality and consequences of the moment. And if anything, Al Green was demonstrating leadership by saying, look, even though at that moment he probably knew ahead of time nobody else was going to join in, which makes it even more profound that he said, look, I'm still doing it. I
Yeah.
believe, so I don't know that anybody who stayed motionless that night, I don't know how many of them, even at this point, have caught on.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Yeah. I think this is why I heard a post from John Leguizamo. You know John
Yeah,
Leguizamo,
oh
the
yes, yes,
actor?
yes.
He is excellent. If you're not following him on Instagram, do it, because he put out a post this week basically to Democratic uh, Congress people, essentially saying, "Stop friggin' asking me for money. Stop
Right,
asking me for money.
right.
I don't want to hear your speeches." And this is what I say. Like, I say it to the people that I used to have on my show back when we were living in a normal, somewhat normal world, that I admired in the Democratic Party. But now I see posturing more than actually taking action. I want to acknowledge one person actually who came around last week, and we'll hopefully get Eric back on the show soon. Eric Swalwell
Oh yes.
signed on to backing impeachment efforts just this past Saturday. And so the chorus is growing. I hope more and more of them are realizing that vote us back into power so we can then do something for you to uphold the oath that we work for you and are put in power to do. Like, that doesn't work. That's
No.
not going to cut the mustard now. Your outrage tweets, your hot clips, your TikToks, none of that is going to cut it right now. What are you doing? What are you not doing? There's so many tools at their disposal. And I just want to talk about a few. The Congress is one of the entities that is under incredible assault, the Article 1 authority, and we can talk about the war in a few minutes. But the other actors, constitutional actors who need to be upholding their end of the stick right now are states. State AGs, state governors. To an extent, they have done this a lot, but I think there's a lot more they can be doing.
Yes.
Just today, actually, let me mention this. We got the news that Colombia activist Mahmoud Khalil will be released from prison. This is very, very good news. He's, of course, the anti-genocide Palestinian advocate who never committed any crime, never engaged in any terrorism or pro-terrorism activities, who was targeted by the Trump administration and sent to this detention center in Louisiana. During a phone hearing today, Judge Michael Farbiars of the U.S. District Court for New Jersey said that the government's attempt to continue to detain Khalil was highly, highly unusual. Fabriars recently ruled that Khalil's arrest and detention over his activism at Columbia was likely unconstitutional. He said, quote, "There is at least something to the underlying claim that there is an effort to use the immigration charge here to punish Mr. Khalil," he said during the hearing. And of course, that would be unconstitutional. So Khalil's release comes on the heels of the release of Rumeysa Öztürk, the tough student that I had mentioned. And speaking of what other people can do, I wanted to underscore this op-ed that was written by our friend John Bonifaz at Free Speech for People and his colleague Alexandra Flores-Kilty. And they are advocating for more investigation, criminal investigation into the administration's actions by the state AG in Massachusetts. They said when it comes to immigration enforcement, the AG recently said on Boston Public Radio, when it comes to immigration enforcement, the scale is stacked against us, claiming that there was little she could do to hold ICE accountable. But John and Alexandra write, when it comes to enforcing state criminal laws prohibiting kidnapping, the duty is squarely with the state attorney general and the district attorney where the kidnapping occurred. Massachusetts has the opportunity and responsibility not only to draw a line in the sand for our state, but to take leadership nationally as politically motivated unlawful abductions by the Trump administration continue to occur. And, Jack, that kind of goes back to our conversations about ICE. I was looking into this just because it seems so blatantly illegal. Not only is it dangerous for these ICE agents to be unmasked, it's likely a violation of Fourth Amendment rights, of due process. They are creating incredibly dangerous situations where people do not know if this is actually a federal agent who's confronting them. And, basically setting up a case where confrontations, if not fatal confrontations, could occur because people do not know who they're being detained by. It says everything. I mean, everything about this screams abduction and kidnapping. And actors, including Congress, from the impeachment standpoint, but also state AGs from the criminal prosecution standpoint, should be not saying our hands are tied and we can't do a lot about this, but instead pulling on every legal lever that they have in their authority to prosecute this terrorism.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought this particular point up. I talked about that they're masked and that they don't often have identifying information. But I don't know if this is something that you personally have noticed. I've seen instances where there is temporarily a mask that's off, or maybe on this particular person, maybe they didn't have one on in the first place. Some of these people look incredibly young. Mm-hmm. They don't look to be the age of somebody who has had the time in life to get a college degree, gain employment with a federal agency, go through the appropriate channels and training required to be acting in an official capacity. Now, I have nothing to prove that that's the case, but look, there are a lot of things right now that we don't have the evidence of to be able to prove or disprove. That in and of itself is problematic. Mm-hmm. Our leadership needs to be asking, who are the people that are showing up? Look, there was talk at one time that Trump, and this is months ago, that Trump might be willing to utilize the Proud Boys or various groups of people to assist.
Yeah.
My hunch is that's probably already in play.
Who these people are. Yeah.
Right.
Like right. The 1500 pardoned insurrectionists, like went straight from that to enrolling in ICE.
Yes.
Yeah.
And look, let's just think about for a moment what that signals. Here are people who, many of them, convicted felons, who were pardoned, and that's an entirely different issue, but may very possibly now be working under the heading of a federal agency. And
Mhm.
I suspect, again, I don't know, but I suspect the way some of this would probably happen would be the equivalent of a sheriff deputizing somebody in an emergency, right? Where they don't have I'm from a small town, a small rural town, not a very large force, sheriff's department or police department. And throughout my lifetime, there have been a couple of instances where on major issues, they've deputized people who hadn't been through law enforcement training, but they needed them in a capacity that they may or may not have needed that training in the urgency of the moment for a day
Yeah.
or maybe even just a few hours.
Yeah.
When it comes to the detainment, the apprehension, and the detainment of immigrants, it's unthinkable.
Yeah.
It's unthinkable that you would just be deputizing even people who haven't been charged with federal crimes, who haven't been uh, a convicted felon, who haven't been pardoned in just an ugly, ugly manner. That would be, but when you add in that they may very well be the people who were there at the Capitol on January 6th and who were there with the intent, if they could get his hands on him, on Vice President Mike Pence, of hanging a vice president of the United States. And to think those might be, some of those people might be involved in what we're seeing play out. And that, for me, that is like science fiction. It should be science fiction, but we've seen so many things with this administration that you wouldn't have even fathomed seeing in a science fiction story, right? That even for that, it would be kind of crazy.
Yeah, when you're talking about the pardon Gen Sixers, I go back to a message I put out to them right after Donald Trump illegally assumed office on January 20th. And that is, really, suckers, this guy literally used you for 4
Oh,
years when he could have pardoned you before he left office in 2021. And instead, he used you as political pawns,
oh my God,
get
yes,
himself reelected,
yes,
had you singing from your jail cell, most embarrassing songs about
right,
being, political
right,
prisoners that he made you. He turned you into criminals. He used you to do the dirty work that he would never use his tiny little fingers to do himself.
right.
He used you. He turned, I mean, so many of those people, a lot of them were veterans. A lot of them had no criminal record before this. He literally turned these 1,600 people into criminals. Some of them got them to commit seditious conspiracy against this country to keep him in power in an election that he lost, use their suffering, their separation from their family that he caused for 4 years, and then when he got back in power is once again using you folks, if this is in fact true that they're the ICE agents, using you to do his dirty work, so that in a few years, when you have that come to Jesus moment, you can't even look your own children in the eye because you realized what sickness, what hatred, what criminality, what terrorism you carried out on a behalf of a man who doesn't give a shit about you.
Absolutely. I like the way you framed that. He used them. They were political pawns, and he's still using them.
Yeah.
He's still using them. I think there's kind of this human factor of oftentimes when a human being has been played, it's such an embarrassing thing for
Yeah.
them
It's hard.
that rather than get angry and go on the counteroffensive and say you can't do this to me, that they often double down because in their mind that will have the effect of concealing that they were played, right? If I don't admit I was played, maybe nobody else will see that I was played, and so they throw even more support towards somebody like Donald Trump. But like you said, there's an end point with that in terms of consequences, whether that be facing your children or having to walk around as your children grow up, age, and become the information that you've been able to keep from them for so long. Now they're old enough they can find it on their own. And so you're always walking around with this thought in the back of your head: do my kids know what a dirtbag I am, and just aren't saying anything about it? Now, as a parent, that's unthinkable to me. With the birth of my uh, oldest daughter, my thinking changed dramatically. Right? It suddenly became not just
It's not
what
about
do
you
I think
anymore.
about.
Yeah.
Right? It's how will this look not only now but later
Yeah.
to my children, and
Yeah.
nobody's thinking that far out anymore.
Yeah.
Except people like the Heritage Foundation.
Oh yeah.
Right?
They've gamed it out for decades. And while
Absolutely.
we're sleeping, while we're literally sleeping on it. That's why I'm so insistent upon immediate action, because there's no time. I mean, these people have literally been gaming this out for years.
Right.
And we're just sleeping. And, Democrats, I think you and I both come from the Republican side. I've always considered myself an independent, but I aligned with Republicans for years.
Yes.
Those people, they don't sit around and strategize all day long.
No.
I heard the discussion the other day, and I want to talk about Iran before you leave us tonight, because I think it's utterly egregious what's going on there. But think back to the Tea Party movement and how that really wasn't in size anything comparable to the millions of people that are protesting Donald Trump right now. I heard this discussed this week on MSNBC. And yet that movement hijacked the entire Republican Party. And they acted because of the demands of that movement. And Donald Trump was a candidate and ultimately became president because of the demands of that movement. And Democrats can't even, as I said at the top, harness the outrage, harness the power of 5 million, I think that's a low estimate, by the way, people in the street on one day to say we've had enough with this. Like, what the hell are you doing? Who are you listening to? Why are you not listening to us? For God's sakes, get with the program, read the room. This is what we want. And by the way, if you start listening to us, we're going to be your greatest friggin' champions, and you're going to have a better chance of getting reelected than you ever did before. Like, read the fucking room. Excuse my language.
I love the intensity of that, because it's something you and I share that kind of intensity about. Look, there are times when I will call out either collectively or sometimes an individual in Democratic leadership, right? And I'll get Democrats that jump on me, right? In fact, I wind up on lists, don't follow lists as not a true Democrat for some of the comments that I make, but I will never deviate from this point. It is my obligation and duty to call out leadership in my own party,
of course,
when they are not doing their job.
Yes.
To be a fan, or to be like it's this popularity contest and just be positive, that is not responsible citizenry. It is not.
No.
And right now, our leadership is not coming forth with the intensity. I heard you speaking earlier about, look, it needs to be such an intense barrage of lawsuits. And if it's something that's possible, do it as part of the collective.
Yes.
Don't tell me that it's got a slim chance. Don't tell me don't tell me about it by itself, what it can and can't do. Make it part of the collective and throw.
We lost Jack for a second, but I'm sure he'll be back. I'm sure he'll be back with us in just a minute. Oh, there we go.
Okay, good. Okay, here we go. Okay, sorry about that. That's not happening.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing is business as usual.
It's yeah.
And business as usual in this situation is death rattle.
It's insane. Okay, I want to take that note about business as usual to talk about the kind of inanity of the media coverage I've seen this week about Trump and Iran, and them talking about him like he is a cogent, mentally stable individual who is just going to make some wise decisions about putting our nation at war within the next 2 weeks. Like that even means anything. Like he ever holds to his promises or even knows what the hell he's talking about. Or I've just,
Right.
as all of this discussion is going on this week and I'm listening to the news reports and I'm like, Trump will decide and Trump will this. And I'm like, do you remember that this is a guy who less than 8 months ago was swaying back and forth in a high school auditorium to the Village People while Kristi Noem tried to get the crowd to not leave or be alarmed? Okay, this is a man who is not mentally there. This is a man who stole classified documents and ordered his employees to hide them from federal agents in his golf course in Florida. This is a man who was convicted of 34 felony counts for cheating his way into the presidency the first time. This is a man who's been a Russian asset from at least the 80s. This is not a man who we seriously talk about making war plans in the interests of the United States or the free world, either having the capacity or the motive to. Like, what are we talking about? What are we talking about?
Jessica, I've argued with people over this point so many times over the years. There are still those people, even Democrats out there, who for some reason, whether they call it cagey, whether they call it cunning, whether they call it intelligence, whatever, that still have this idea that Donald Trump is this meticulous genius, right? That's always playing 5-degree chess, right? Look,
No.
Donald Trump hasn't mastered checkers, right?
Yeah.
He can't even approach a chessboard, let alone be strategic. I like to say that any political policy success Donald Trump has ever had has been a happy accident, but not the result of clear, logical, analytical thinking. The idea that this man, who can't even stay on topic during a 10-minute political speech without straying off into these weird, delusional, right, rants. The idea that a guy who doesn't even read the briefings, he can't maintain focus long enough to read the intelligence briefings. The idea that this guy is going to strategically, methodically, intelligently get us through a wartime situation is insanity.
It is.
It's just not something that's going to happen. So, look, when these situations of this magnitude occur with Trump, and when there's something that even Democrats can say, well, yeah, but I guess this thing that could be helpful to us as a nation, I guess it did result out of that. I hate the guy, but at least this little piece, that's not something that's the result of him being good at his job and an effective president of the United States. That is just some little piece of the accident. That, look, if you if you go out and bulldoze a house down, there's probably going to be something during that process that later you could say, well, that little piece was good. Like maybe as the stuff was falling towards the bulldozer, right? A beam misses your head by 3 inches. Later, you can say, yeah, it was a wreck. It was unlawful. It was horrible. But you remember when that beam fell? I mean, if that would have hit him, it would have killed him right there, but it missed it. So we can be thankful about that. That's the game a lot of people play. And we don't need to be thankful for happy accidents.
No.
We need to be angry about the fact that it was an accident in the first place.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, just to close the loop on this Iran issue, I mean, I think, God forbid it comes down to Donald Trump taking action without the authorization of Congress. And I mentioned at the top how even, Democrats are aligning with a Republican from Kentucky over this issue right now.
Right.
But even if he proceeds with congressional authorization, I just wanted to read this piece from Fawaz Gerges for The Guardian. He says, like the U.S.-led invasion and occupation of Iraq in 2003, Israel's war on Iran is neither legal nor just. It's a war of choice, not of necessity. And should the U.S. or its European allies, particularly Britain, join in, they risk being dragged into another disastrous and unlawful conflict in the Middle East. A U.S. military intervention would be in direct contravention of international law. Already, the U.S., once the architect and guardian of the international order, is now among its chief violators. Instead of pressuring Netanyahu to end his siege and destruction of Gaza, hint, hint, mass distraction from the genocide in Gaza, if you didn't notice what kind of tool a war is for dictators, Trump has fully sided with Netanyahu and called Israel's attacks on Iran excellent. He has demanded Iran's unconditional surrender and is considering strikes on their nuclear facilities. So God forbid we get to that point. This should be another impeachable article of impeachment against Donald Trump. This should be not Democrats backing off and saying, oh my God, we're at war now, we can't go after the president. No, now is the time. I underscore on this show how Netanyahu used the horror of October 7th, if not planned for it, to escape from the accountability for his corruption and his crimes. This is their playbook. Look at this. 1 week ago, Jack, we were talking about millions of people in the streets, and now we're talking about war. This is what these people want. That is what dictators and authoritarians want. It's how they capitalize and take away our rights by creating chaos, real or contrived. So for God's sakes, get on ball, Democrats. I want to read before we wrap up just from a Substack that you put up recently, because like I said before, it was so on par with what I'd been thinking. And you basically are talking about the opportunity of this moment and the fact that in spite of how egregious and dire the circumstances are, that so much corruption has been exposed. And Jack, I was literally having this exact conversation with a friend yesterday, an OG supporter of 14th Now, and someone who's really in this fight with us. And she was saying, Jessica, the rot is coming to the surface.
It is.
The corruption is if we had just had Kamala Harris in office right now, yes, would things be universes better than they are now? Yes, of course. But we are exposing so much latent corruption right now. And we have an opportunity to really, really clean house, don't we?
We really do. Look, when you, as I think maybe I reference in the piece that I wrote, when you put the sunshine, when you put the daylight on the corruption, that's not only the first step, but I believe it's the most critical step.
Yeah.
Nothing happens without that.
Yes.
And it's not only being revealed,
yes,
but it's being revealed at the same time that people are feeling the impact and the consequences of that corruption right now. I don't think the timing of this really could have been any better, because it's one thing to learn about the corruption, but there's not necessarily an emotional element or impact with that. When you can learn about the corruption at or near the same time that you are feeling the negative consequences to you
Yeah.
as you're learning about, that's leverage. That is, in my opinion, true political leverage. The question is, will our leadership use that leverage and milk it for everything it's worth?
Yep.
You said the time is now a minute ago. Look, my thought process says in a crisis, the time is always right now.
Yeah.
And this is a crisis. And so anything that anybody has to say or thought process, the time is right now. We can't talk about what we should do in 3 months or what we should do in 6 months. It better be being rolled out. If it's
Yeah.
mentioned at all, I would rather hear about what has been done than about what's going to be done.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Jack, it's so good to have you here on Lights On. We
Oh,
got to do this again, okay?
we do. I thank you so much.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And I'm sure I'm going to come visit you on the Jack Hopkins
You
podcast
are.
again soon. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining me today, my
Thank you.
friend. Please, everybody go to jackhopkinsnow.com and jackhopkinsshow.com to find out when and where you can listen and watch Jack's podcast. It's really a special space. So thank you so much. We are going to take action
Thank
now.
you.
We are going to harness this beautiful opportunity of exposing the evil to destroy it. Amen. Amen, Jack. Thank you so much.
Okay, sure.
And thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today on Lights On. I want to remind you, as always, if you want to support this show and my work, I'm really trying to plan a lot of things right now and also have this 7-year-old legal battle I'm fighting against the Trump campaign that is as much relevant right this moment as it ever was. You can do that at thejessicadenson.com/donate, thejessicadenson.com/donate. Genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to everyone who has supported me over the years and continues to. It really, really means the world. You can also buy merch for this show with the motto Stand Out and other Lights On merch at thejessicadenson.com. There's also some links right below the video that go directly to that merch. So thanks so much for supporting the show and spreading the word about Lights On, the movement that is Lights On. Thank you for your involvement. Thank you for being in the streets. Thank you for not relinquishing your power, for claiming it and demanding that our elected representatives honor their oath and uphold their duty to you and me, we the people. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm sure I'm going to see you at another protest very soon. And I think we have very big impeachment news on the horizon. So stay tuned here on Lights On. As always, my friends, let your light shine.